Which activities do I use as part of my daily self-care or morning time? Um, Way back when, like back when I was still in the cycle of starting self-care and stopping self-care and feeling better when I do it and then crashing when I quit. And in that cycle, um, it was in that I developed this idea that I ended up using then once I did finally get to my breaking point where I was like, okay, fine. I am literally committing to managing my energy, aka doing daily self-care every day for the rest of my life, no matter how good I feel. That was the promise I made to myself when I woke up that morning, July 9th, 2016. And in order to achieve that, as far as like, I'm going to take care of myself every single day, dude, life happens. Like, we don't always have the same amount of time and energy to devote to taking care of ourselves. So, a philosophy that I still hold and I use it whenever I need to, because I think this falls in that category of giving ourselves grace, is how about we set a very low bar? That kind of like no matter what happens today, with even just a teensy bit of conscious thought about I matter, so let me take care of myself with like as little as 5 minutes, I can do my self-care for today. So as long as I don't forget about myself completely, then that counts as a day of self-care. So we're talking about a super low bar, starting extremely small. And I made a list of activities for myself about what are the things that I do know help me feel better when I do them. And I'm going to go through them just really quick because I think they're pretty straightforward. Um, so the first one is a gratitude list or journaling a brain dump of some kind. Next would be some sort of exercise, and I'm not talking bodybuilding, I'm talking like movement, so maybe some light stretching, some slow paced yoga, a walk around the block. Maybe you play a couple songs that you like to dance to, or if you're really in your dark feelings, maybe you play some ragers and like really rock out to that. But again, movement. The next thing is waking up our vocal cords, waking up our voice. And for some people, I think this is more important than for others. But I know for me, my morning time almost always includes either singing or talking, like what I'm doing right now. This is technically part of my morning time. Next is meditation. This is one that I do meditate. I dabble in meditation. I would not at all call myself a meditator. I have very little consistency in my track record with meditation, but I know there are so many people in this world that swear by it, so I feel like I should throw it in here. But at the same time, I want to offer a really kind disclaimer that says if you struggle with meditation, please do not equate meditation with self-care. It is not required in order to take good care of yourself. You don't have to meditate. The next thing is the deservability treatment by Louise Hay that was given to me by a therapist that I saw the day before my little rock bottom moment when I found Abraham. And so for a couple months, I read that deservability treatment out loud to myself first thing in the morning and when I got home from work as I was like transitioning back into being home. The next thing on my list personally is some type of learning or study. Like, I love the sensation of learning something new. Like, one of the best days of my entire life that stands out to me in this moment is the Saturday where I spent like 10 hours teaching myself human design on Google and YouTube by just like piecing it together one factoid at a time. You should know, like, that is not to say that everybody needs to study every morning. Like, I am saying for me personally, like in StrengthsFinder, for example, I have Learner in my top 5 and have had basically every time I've ever taken StrengthsFinder. I also have a whole stellium in Gemini and a couple planets in Sagittarius. So for me, learning and expanding my mental horizons feeds my soul and gives me a sense of like accomplishment, like I did something today. So, learning and study for me are a huge part of my self care activities. Next, I would say fixing a healthy meal. So, especially where I was used to like just feeding myself whatever I could tear out of a wrapper, if I spent the time to like scramble a couple eggs and make a piece of toast, I was like counting that as self care. You know? And healthy is in quotation marks for a reason because that's a sliding scale. It can be relatively more healthy than what you're used to, and that is that's a brilliant 1 degree turn. And if you spend even 5 extra minutes of effort on preparing yourself a quote unquote healthier meal than what you're used to, again, that is a brilliant 1 degree turn, and I would personally count that as a day of self-care. You're doing great. I've mentioned a lot, I listen to uplifting content. Again, I'm a very auditory person, so that works for me. Dolly, she is way more into like listening to classical music. For her, in her morning time, like while she's journaling, that is what she finds soothing and calming and comforting. Listening to people talk first thing in the morning is overwhelming to her, so she would rather go the no words classical music route. And so, again, I just want to reiterate kind of whatever works for you is absolutely perfect as long as it's helping you to feel better. You feel better, you feel calmer, you feel like you have a more positive outlook, a more hopeful vantage point on the day ahead. Again, these are really the reasons why we're trying to anchor our energy. It's not at all the specific activities that you're using to do that. Some people are super into reading, like actually picking up a book and turning the pages and looking at it with their eyeballs. I personally can barely tolerate to do that, so I am way more into audiobooks. But at the same time, I have a huge library on my Audible account where I love audiobooks. And so sometimes I'll go to YouTube and find some content there, and other times I will pick out an audiobook that found me, and I'll listen to that. And the last thing I have on my list of activities that count as self-care is time spent doing something fun. So I've mentioned sometimes, if you haven't heard it, no big deal, but like I used to do paint by numbers a lot. And I also have spent a lot of time doing pour painting, like where you layer the colors together and pour it on the canvas. I spend a lot of time drawing. I really like riding bikes. I like going paddleboarding. I like going hiking. These are things that I would put in my fun pile. And so any time spent doing any of those things, even if I didn't do a single other thing on the list, if I spent time doing my paint by numbers, I personally would count that as a day of self-care. So my staples currently, these do tend to evolve, kind of in general, but like the specifics of these, but these are how these are the main pillars of my personal self-care activities. Probably number one is journaling. I really, 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 really love to write with my own hand. It is soothing in a way that I find hard to describe in words. And again, if that's not you, don't sweat it. Do what works for you. There's so many different things. I try to get some upliftment in my morning. I like to listen to something that I feel like is pulling my energy into a more positive place. Again, even if that's only like 1% or 1 millimeter. And even if I get into my day and I instantly forget everything I just heard and I'm in a bad mood because whatever happened, it's like at least I got in a little bit of upliftment in the first part. And I'll do that again tomorrow, and I'll do that again tomorrow. And 6 years later, my average frequency is in a completely different universe. Really, the point is the quality alone time with myself.